Hi, and welcome to Beyond the Barracks, the podcast where service ends and the story begins. And today I've got Andy Williams, who's agreed to join me and talk about his exploits and his book that he's got out and all the other amazing stuff that he does. Hi, and welcome.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be on and chat to you.
Yeah, well, we met about a year ago, wasn't it? And it was a fun night anyway with Woody.
Was it a year? Yeah, it was about a year ago.
Well, it's coming up.
Long way.
I'm gonna miss the ball this year, unfortunately. So, but yeah, I'm sure I'll be there in Fort.
Yeah. No, it was a great night.
Yeah. So you tell us about a bit about your early life before you joined the military, and I believe you're an ex cadet like myself as well, and why did you get drawn to that?
Yeah, I was. I joined the cadets at. I think you had to be 13, but I lied. I said I was 12 because I was so desperate to join. But yeah, so I'm from originally from North Wales, but I spent a lot of my childhood in Saudi Arabia. So my my biological mother abandoned me when I was quite young. I was about 3 or 4, and my dad worked overseas in Saudi Arabia. So my older sister, she was barely a teenager herself, really. She was about 14. We After my mum left, we went and relocated to Saudi for a few years, and then she became my full time caregiver from the age of 16. And we moved back to North Wales, and it was just me and my sister, and we stayed in a small council flat on the North Wales coast. So it was quite challenging early on because I didn't have very fond memories of my mum. She was an alcoholic. She suffered quite a lot with her own mental health. And although she came back into the scene at different stages of my life, I never really had a relationship with her. But from a young age, I couldn't shift a feeling of abandonment and not feeling like I wasn't really wanted. I just sort of felt like I was in the way, and I could never understand at school why all my friends lived with, the parents, or even a single parent. I couldn't really understand why, I didn't really have anything to do with my mum or my dad. But my sister was brilliant. It must have been incredibly tough for her because she was so young herself, and I think what happened was she got to a certain age, she got to her mid to late teens, and she said to my dad that she didn't want to be in Saudi anymore because we lived on a Western compound. There weren't that many other Westerners there, and there wasn't a great deal to do outside the compound. She desperately wanted to come back to North Wales. So there was early years, it was pretty tough. And I suppose I found the cadets because I had an older brother. I had an older brother who he'd already left home before my mother left, and he joined the Royal Marines at 17. So I suppose I looked up to him a little bit because coming from a small village in North Wales, he was off on these adventures and doing all these incredible things, and I suppose I saw it as my way out of North Wales. And I'd see him occasionally when he came back on annual leave, and I always had loads of books. I've always had loads of books, and he would pass me books about the military, also not just the Marines. And I suppose that from an early age, I knew that that was what I wanted to do. And so, as early as I could, I joined the cadets. And I suppose it gave me a sense of belonging, just sort of being part of something, being in a uniform, and just learning all these new skills at a young age.
Yeah, I mean, That's an incredible start, isn't it? I mean, Saudi in because we're around the same age in those days was barren, wasn't it? And for a kid to be over there, that must have been pretty tough. And then you know you go from you go from one extreme to the other, from the desert to soggy, wet North Wales on the coast. It was near Rill, wasn't it? You were.
Yeah, yeah, not too far away.
I'm surprised you haven't got a Scouse accent being from Rill.
I know, yeah. Well, it comes out every now and then.
Yeah. But yeah, so from an early age, obviously, it was your brother was a bit like your role model and your mentor, wasn't he? In that
Yeah,
respect.
yeah. Although I didn't see a lot of him. It was the stuff that he was doing in the Marines. I sort of aspired to. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Saudi, it's not like how it is now. You had the Cobalt Tower bombings in '96. It was it was a very different place to what it is now. There was still public executions happening in the cities, but as a young kid, it's all just one big adventure. And even now, I do think that my urge to travel and adventure, it comes from those early experiences, because there's such the two contrasting places. Like you said, they couldn't be further apart. And yeah, so I think that's where it came from. And then the flat there where we lived, the cadets was probably a stone's throw away. And even from a very young age, I used to read all these books and these magazines. I don't know if you remember, but there was a magazine collection called Combat and Survival that they used to. I think it started in the late '80s into the early '90s, and every couple of weeks they'd put a magazine out, and there'd be some sort of military story in there. There'd be an article on, for example, fieldcraft or some other sort of skill, and I sort of fantasized over these magazines, and I think that's what led me to join the cadets at such a young age.
Yeah. Did you find it a bit easier basic training from being a cadet? Because obviously, I definitely did, because you've got the advantage of knowing the skills already. Maybe not to that high standard, but
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think for anyone, the cadets is a great foundation for the structured environment of being in the military. And like you said, not to the same extent, but you already have an introduction to things like navigation, fieldcraft, marksmanship principles, first aid. So it definitely made the transition easier for me when I actually ended up joining the military. And at a young age, my sister married quite young, and we moved out of the flat temporarily. And unfortunately, the relationship didn't last very long. It was a household plagued by domestic violence, and again, a lot of that was directed or taken out on me, and I think that was another reason for me to. It was sort of a bit of escapism, and like I said, that sense of belonging. But I lived on my own from quite a young age. From about 15, I lived in the flat on my own, and so from a young age, I could, iron my clothes, I could clean the house, I could cook a meal, and also I was in the cadets. So it was a blessing, really, because when I ended up joining, I was well prepared for life in the army, really, and I didn't look back.
yeah. So there wasn't potentially the army felt more like a family, and it was a little bit of potentially, which sounds crazy, bit of a safer place for you when you were that age at 16 joining up. You now all of a sudden have a safe, structured environment. So it
Yeah,
was a transition.
yeah, I absolutely loved it. I
Yeah.
absolutely loved it, even though I was so young when I joined. I didn't see it that way in my mind, and a lot of the people I joined with, they were desperately homesick, and it might be their first time away from their home. But fortunately, I took it all in my stride, and I was helping the older guys in the platoon with their ironing and polishing their boots, and a lot of those skills came from those experiences in the cadets at a young age.
Yeah, it's definitely. I bang on about the cadets all the time. It's definitely an amazing organisation for sure. So you serviced during, it was free para, wasn't it? You was posted to. You ended up, because we all sort of joined the military around the same time when it was quite quiet, and then it just went crazy. So you were deployed to Helmand province when it was probably at its most intense, I'd say. And what stands out to you most about that time during your service?
Yeah, like you said, it was for a soldier. It was for all the good and the bad. It was a fantastic time to join. So I joined not long after the planes went into the Twin Towers and 9/11. So like you said, it was just a perfect time for joining as a young soldier. So I had like several deployments beforehand. I joined at 16, so by the time I actually got to battalion, I was 17, and you can't, as you know, you can't go on ops until you turn 18. So I was 20, nearly 21 when we went to Helmand. It was the first time that conventional forces from the UK had gone into Helmand province in the south, which was regarded as pretty lawless and one of the most hostile parts of Afghanistan at that time. So it was, as a young paratrooper, it was remarkable to be part of something so significant. It was so it's. A few people said it was some of the most intense fighting since the end of the Korea War, sustained conventional warfare, and I have always said that it was some of the best experiences of my life, but also some of the worst. Obviously because of being there, but it was great to be a part of it as a battle group.
Yeah, so you were two. You wanted to be two para, didn't you? I believe, but because of your age, you ended up having to go to free para. So the parachute regiment. I think if I'd been maybe born now, it would be something that I would have wanted to go into without doubt. Because my cadet days, we had a para cadet paras, and I love the cap badge. I love the ethos. We had a training sergeant who was a para. So it pushes you to your limits. I absolutely know and get that. It's one of the hardest things you can do without going special forces. And you know what what I guess advice could you give for someone who's thinking of joining? And where does it push your limits to? How did you get through that training? Because it is like horrendous, and it will push everyone past their limits, won't it? The training.
Yeah, I learned a lot about myself through the training. So obviously, my brother was in the Royal Marines, so I wasn't sure how he was going to respond to me joining the Paras because as anyone from the military will know, there's some light-hearted banter between the Marines and the Paras. But I got to an age where I thought I wanted to go in the Marines, but then I didn't want to copy my brother, so to speak. And from learning more about the military from being in the cadets, the Paras just stood out to me at that time, and listening to all the conflicts that they'd been involved with since their formation in the Second World War, through to Suez and the Falklands, and nearly every major conflict involving British UK interests since the end of the Second World War. The Paras have taken a lead role in that, and they certainly fitness is one of the one of the biggest factors in joining. And like you said, the exhilaration of throwing yourself out of an aircraft, the beret, it all appealed to me, and I completely committed to joining. There was nothing else I wanted to do, and because I lived on my own, I didn't really go to school a great deal, but instead of bunking off school and getting into trouble like most kids at my age at that time, I used to come up with these crazy workout routines and just go and like thrash myself for the whole day on the beach or running up a mountain with a day sack full of rocks. Or a friend and I, we found an old telegraph pole, and we tied a tethered rope to it, and we drag it along the sand. And I was so fit for a 16-year-old, and I think that's probably the first thing. You have to prepare yourself physically. And looking back now, putting a load of rocks in a bag and run up a mountain is probably not the best way to prepare your body, because you have to.
That's all we had, though, wasn't it? In those days,
It's, when you think back now, it's crazy, but I don't know whether there wasn't the knowledge and understanding that there is now. In terms of focusing on recovery and the longevity of your health. That's why so many veterans, I'm sure of it, have got knackered knees and backs, and in their sort of late 30s. But no, it got me. I was fit, absolutely. I was so fit at the time. So preparing yourself physically is certainly one. Because of all the books that I read, I was so knowledgeable about what the process would involve. So that definitely gave me a sort of a quiet confidence that at least I knew what to expect to a certain degree. Luckily, because of my age, I managed to stay injury free. Some of the older guys suffered with, broken legs, twisted ankles, anything that you can think of. So there's the mental side of things, the preparation, and the knowledge, and then I think mentally as well. But without actually putting yourself through something so horrific, I think you'll agree it's hard to prepare yourself for something like that until you've been in it. And I think because I was so desperate to join, failing and going back to North Wales just wasn't an option for me. I'd soon rather be carried out than to give in. And I think what it taught me is that your body will give up far before your mind will. And I always used to think that no matter what they do to me physically, sleep deprivation, poor food, whatever physical training, if I can maintain a strong positive mindset, they can't touch that. There's nothing they can do with my psychological state. And through some of the events that you have to go through, I think that you push yourself far beyond the limits that you feel that you're capable of, and that only serves you well for everything in life. I think whether it's something physically or academically or in business, just knowing that you've got it in you. You've got it in you to do more than what you think.
Yeah, I love that image of you running along the beach in North Wales with a log. It's just so like 80s, 90s, isn't it? Because we just had to make things up, which I think was definitely stood us in an amazing stead for your career and the mindset that you had before you went in. So it's definitely some top tips. Without a doubt, beast yourself beyond belief, because they'll go further and get that mindset that there's nothing they can do to you that's going to break you. Yeah.
And I think the great thing is, Gina, is like anyone can do it. You don't need loads of money. Anyone can pack a Bergen and go on the hills for the day, or just go for a really really long run. It's out in the elements. So I'm always a great believer of getting out and doing it, not in an air conditioned gym. Get out in the elements and get a feel for what it's going to be like.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to get outside and get out of the gym. That's the only way to do it, isn't it? So many reasons we could bang on about. So you eventually decided to leave the paras, and you did a bit of stuff around various things which we won't discuss, and then you eventually changed tack and joined the fire brigade, which was an interesting switch. Well, I guess it's not too. There's a lot of us, isn't it? That military, we still want to serve, and I think that's where it comes from, isn't it? So, how did you find it? Different to what you'd done in the past with the paras and stuff.
Yeah, so after I left the military, I went through a life changing transitional period where I ended up getting diagnosed with complex post traumatic stress. I was diagnosed with cancer, and at the same time as all that was going on, I was diagnosed with an incurable kidney disease. And yeah, it all compounded into a really sort of bad few years that took a lot of sort of digging in deep and sort of discover it, sort of self discovery. I mean, I wouldn't change any of it. I wouldn't change any of it. It came really close to being sort of the end of me, and through various support systems that I had in place. Fortunately enough, I came through the other side. So, similar to the people that we know, I did quite a long time working various places across the world, doing a variety of jobs in the security industry, you can say. And then in 2017, my kidneys failed completely. So I went into complete renal failure. I always knew that it would happen. I just didn't know when. And luckily for me, I was able to manage the symptoms that I had for the best part of 10 years until my body shut down. And so that forced me to come back to the UK, and I very quickly found myself lying on what should have been my deathbed, really. And I had nearly a year of hemodialysis just to sort of keep me alive whilst I was on the transplant register. And in a strange turn of events, my sister that had given up everything at a young age to raise me as one of her own, she saved my life a second time by giving me one of her kidneys. So yeah, in 2017, randomly, it was on June the 6th, so obviously D-Day, or my sort of D-Day, yeah, which was really strange. She gave me a kidney to save my life, and within 3 months of having the transplant, I mean, it's a strange thing because I sort of see your body, especially being the person that I am, so stubborn and wanting to be the top of my game, and I've always maintained sort of high standards of physical fitness, but to slowly see my body sort of shut down and deteriorate, and there's nothing I could do about it. It was tough. It was really tough, but it was. I mean, it's remarkable what they do. I was out of the hospital, and then within 3 months, I did a half marathon in Delamere, actually, to raise money for veterans' mental health. And so I came to the realization that I probably wasn't going to go back to the work that I was doing for various reasons. And I met my wife at that time as well. So, as you know, it can be quite taxing on any relationship because I was forever waiting on a phone call. And, you receive a phone call on a Sunday afternoon and you're on a plane on the Monday. And I sort of did that line of work for long enough that I knew that I wanted to do something different. And it was actually my wife that said, "Have you considered the fire service?" So she'd been in the fire service for a few years, but in an admin role. And she said, "Well, there's loads of veterans in the fire service. There, a lot of them say it's very similar to being in the military. Why don't you have it? Why don't you give it a go? They're recruiting at the moment." And I'd always fancied it actually, but I always had this impression that it was really difficult to get in, and they very rarely recruited. So I just thought, well, throw my hat in and see what happens. And fortunately, I had my transplant in 2017. End of 2018, I was accepted into the fire service.
Wow. Yeah, so there's a lot there in it, and I think the one thing I missed, because I concentrated on your brother, I think, is the incredible woman that your sister is, and then for her to turn up a second time, and I'm sure cancer's affected my family, and unfortunately there was nothing we could do. We couldn't do anything like that. But I think it just shows what an amazing woman she is to do that, because it does take a massive. You might say it. You might go, "Oh, I'll give you my kidney," but whether you'll actually do it, I mean, I'm sure most of us would do it. I'm sure I would do it. Yourself, because you'd rather have that person in your life and give them every chance. So yeah,
Yeah,
well,
it's so difficult because like it's not something that you would ask. And oh, my family's so small. My like I said, my mum and dad aren't on the scene. Speak to my brother occasionally. There's only really my sister. So I mean, up until that point, I know it sounds a bit dark, but I sort of had accepted. I'd come to terms with my own mortality on so many occasions, from incidents that had happened in Afghanistan where just through pure luck that I've managed to pull through when so many others around me didn't. And then my cancer diagnosis. So it was skin cancer that I was diagnosed with, malignant melanoma, and they put it down to all the time that I'd spent as a child in Saudi, because even though I only lived there for a few years, I went back every year for the summer holidays to see my dad. And I've actually got a ginger beard when I grow it, so I don't. Although I love being in the heat, my body doesn't so much. So fortunately for me, I had two surgeries and they managed to remove it, and I was reassessed every few months for 5 years. But it did nearly cause problems when it came to me going on the transplant register, because you have to be clear from cancer for so many years. Otherwise, they view it as, it's sort of, it could be a potentially a wasted kidney if it recurs. So I'm so grateful and so lucky that I was able to sort of pull through it and still be here.
yeah. I mean, not one thing that could have killed you, but two. I mean, as you say, in the army, the army, the military, we do at some point, if you've been on operations, think, well, if this is it, it's it, isn't it? But I think dealing with a terminal illness has got to be a bit different, because you can, as you say, your body's starting to be destroyed, isn't it? And you don't even recognise yourself. It's incredibly hard.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm obviously I'm one of the lucky ones. There was randomly. So the night I went into hospital, not long after the Manchester Arena bombing, and there were so many other people on the renal ward waiting for a transplant, because all of the surgeries were packed with patients. A lot of the kidneys were. The operation was delayed for whatever reason, and it caused complications when they actually came to for the surgery from a deceased donor, if you like. So I'm so grateful and lucky that, luckily for me, my sister was willing and able to do that for me.
Yeah, incredible. So that obviously, without a doubt, everything changes mindsets and stuff. So that obviously sent you on that different journey. And how do you think if it did change your mindset, what sort of effects did that experience of being sick give
Yeah,
you?
I think, like you said, with anyone, whether it's in conflict or with illness, um, you do a lot of soul searching and of what really is important to you. And I definitely think that I'm more of a like compassionate, empathetic person now. I'm not the sort of young para hothead that I used to be. I try to see the good in people. So it's the whole thing has been was a bit a humbling experience, and the that was really the catalyst that led me to ended up publishing my book. It was something I always wanted to do,
Mm.
but I never thought it'd be good enough. And when I was lying on that bed, I thought I'm gonna do it, whether it's good or not. I'm gonna do it for my son, and I'm gonna do it for other veterans that have struggled with their mental health. And being in the fire service is great because it gives you the flexibility to do that when you're not on shift.
Yeah, that's its advantage, doesn't it? But yeah, so your book Beyond the Drop Zone, absolutely awesome book, and we may as well plug it now, or you can find it on Amazon, is it?
Yeah, Amazon, Audible,
Oh, you on
ebook.
Audible?
Yeah. I went through the painstaking effort of recording it
And it's
myself
your
at a
in your
few.
voice.
Yeah, and it
Great.
was a lot harder than what I thought.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, definitely one to add to your bucket list to buy. Um, so during your time as a firefighter, then how did your military background and what you'd been through with your other career and what had happened to you within getting cancer and being diagnosed with kidney disease, was it?
Yeah.
How did that sort of help you when you were working within the fire service?
Yeah, I mean, I think for any veteran, the I can't speak for all the emergency services, but certainly for me, the fire service, there's so many transferable skills. Yes, it's a different uniform, it's a different role, but I think you touched on it earlier. There's something definitely in us, in something altruistic, is in like service and helping somebody. And I don't know where it comes from. I don't know whether it's a learned behaviour or it's innate, but I always knew that I would never be comfortable doing a normal, and I say normal, but like an office job. Uh, so I love it. It's a brilliant job. So leadership is a perfect sort of crossover, because especially now I'm making the decisions as an officer. They're time critical, sort of dynamic, life saving sometimes decisions that are happening, just like in the military. Obviously, the teamwork, you work together in a small group, which is called a watch, and it's just like being in a section. And as you'll know from the military, you spend time together in all different kind of moods and states. So, you're on station together when you're super tired, when you go through something particularly traumatic. You eat together, you train together. We do stuff outside of work together. So you're very much a close team that look out for each other as well. So I'd say, yeah, definitely like leadership principles, working together, and not every day is exciting as being on ops or on tour, but it happens, and there's such a wide variety of incidents you can turn out to. So although it's fire and rescue. So we have an MTA capability now. So if there was a active shooter, we have a role in that kind of scenario. Anything from we will attend as many road traffic collisions as we do drownings, house fires, gaining entries. So there's a quite a broad skill set. But for any sort of veteran looking at that sort of career path, it's brilliant. It's a steep learning curve, but I feel like take to it naturally. And then there's the discipline side. Definitely not like it is in the military, but you still march, you parade, you bull your boots, all that sort of good stuff. So yeah, it's just nice to be in a uniform, I think.
Yeah, there's definitely direct correlations. I tried to join when I first got out, and then realised that I actually had asthma, so there was no chance. I was struck off.
Yeah. That's surprising after the tens of thousands of miles you clock up
Yeah,
and the
it's
crazy endurance things you
never
do.
affected me, and I was very lucky to be able to join, because in my day we just used to tick boxes and say that we didn't have stuff. I wouldn't have been able to probably even get in now. Bearing in mind I've done some of the hardest courses a female can do, it's like it didn't affect me. But I think smoke might have done. I haven't got iron lungs. So what sort of advice would you give to anyone who's a veteran or a first responder who's going through, serious mental health challenges or illnesses to help them,
Yeah,
get through it?
yeah. So for me, what I wish I'd practiced more as a sort of a younger soldier was self care and not. I think like when I was in, you didn't really talk about mental health. It wasn't. Certainly was a thing, but it was. Alcohol was definitely a big factor for me in battalion, and wrongly as a coping mechanism. But I didn't really know anything about it until it became too late for me, and it was it was sort of catastrophic. So luckily for me, I got the help that I needed. But I think recognizing it first of all, for those that have experienced it, it's such a lonely place to be, and you feel like you're the only person in the world, and not just feeling like incredibly sad all the time, and incredibly like intrusive thoughts, but I suffer quite badly with hypervigilance and arousal, like just like a startle response to stupid things, and it was like the shame and embarrassment that came with it. But it's hard to see it when you're in it. But it's important to know that you're not on your own, and a lot of the time, how you're feeling, it's a normal response to an abnormal set of circumstances. So the trauma that your body is dealing with, physiologically, it's normal. It's like it's a wound. It's an internal wound that needs to be looked after, and it can feel quite triggering and quite raw sometimes. But yeah, I think it's important to know you're not the only one. You're not going through it alone. So acknowledging it, and that might be someone you're close to or a friend telling you that you're not quite yourself. And then secondly is your support network. So for us at work, at the moment, if we have a particularly traumatic job, anything to do with paediatrics is obviously naturally quite tough on the watch. We'll sit down as a watch over a brew, and we'll have a chat about it in the first instance. I always found that it was difficult to speak to someone that hadn't had those same experiences, because some part of me thought, well, you can't understand because you weren't there on that rooftop. How do you know how I'm feeling? So I think there's a lot to be said for just having a chat with your mate, whether it be over a coffee, over the phone. And I've been on the receiving end as well, where lads and lasses in crisis where they've called me up, and you don't know what to say because you want to look after them and you want to do right for them, but it's sort of you don't know what to say. And what I found is sometimes you don't need to say anything; you just need to listen, and that's all that they might need. So I think it starts on sort of shop floor level, talking to someone and reaching out to your support network. I think, fortunately now, the narrative around post-traumatic stress and mental health is changed to what it was 20, 30 years ago. There's some fantastic charities out there, that you and I both know, along with others. So these are subject matter experts in dealing with trauma. I mean, we've got a generation, sort of the early to mid late 2000s, got a generation of young warfighters. So the help is out there. So the next thing would be to seek help. Try a few charities. Some might work better than others, but there are systems there in place that are gonna help you. And then I find with myself now, I mean, I haven't got all the answers. I feel like I'm in a good place now, but I have bad days like everybody else. I still have things that trigger me, but the age that I am now, I'm able to sort of self-manage and I know my coping mechanisms. But for me personally, I know that if I'm not exercising or getting outdoors, for me, getting outside is probably the best form of therapy. I've got my dog. He's like my best pal, and spend a lot of time together. On the mountains and in the outdoors. That for me is better than any form of therapy. But that's just what works for me personally. But I know if I'm not exercising, getting outdoors, if I'm not getting enough sleep or taking in too much alcohol, I know that my mental health will start to dip, and I've learned that over time. So I feel like you have to have that foundation in check before anything, before even considering any kind of medication. And it's not always easy, so that's why getting outdoors is brilliant, because you can call your mate up and say, "Come on, let's go for a bit of a mooch on the mountains."
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree with all of that. And I'm the same as you, nature and exercise. But those three steps are perfect. So make sure you're talking to people who you know or who will listen, and then if not, seek help and and then self manage once you know how to deal with it. They're three really good bits of advice. Definitely.
Yeah, and I think none of us are going to go through life without any. Trauma doesn't have to be war, or there's little trauma as well, and I think everybody will have some form of trauma in their lives. So you have to put yourself in the best position to cope with that, because I know that whatever life I've got left, there's going to be things that pop up that I'm going to have to I'm going to have to deal with. So I think it's a good foundation for anybody, not just veterans or emergency services.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good that it's obviously spoken about a lot more nowadays, because it is a pandemic. I think with even with the kids now, because they don't get out as much, do they? They're in front of screens too much, like we are now, really. Yeah, so going back to your book, I know writing a book and writing down experience is very cathartic. So what what did it give you when you finished that book and it was you received that first copy? of your book
Yeah,
and your name on it.
I mean, it was a long process. I started it back in 2007, and it was a psychologist that I was seeing, and so much had happened in a short space of time. I also almost had this sort of like psychological amnesia. I couldn't remember certain things or the details, and it was his advice, and he said, write it down. Write it down from beginning to end. Don't worry about grammar, spelling. Just write it down. And and as I was writing it, more things came to the surface. I applied the same with stuff from childhood and the career I was lucky enough to have after that. And so I had a decent chunk of the book, and then everything that happened with my kidney was the sort of the catalyst to get it done. I stubbornly, I didn't want to use a ghostwriter. I wanted to write it myself. Although I asked an editor to proofread it and things like that. It was tough writing it. Certain parts, because to give my authentic voice, you have to take yourself back there and relive it. So there were days where I was just a mess, sort of getting through it. But it's probably one of my biggest achievements for someone that didn't finish school and was never really an academic. Put everything that I had into it, and initially I only self-published it to give to my son because I thought all these experiences I'd love one day for him to read about, because we know conflicts of past, Bosnia, Falklands, Iraq. They're not, as time passes, they're not spoken about as much, and all those stories will be forgotten over time. So I wanted something to give him, and I was very fortunate that it was a bestseller on Amazon in a few different categories. So yeah, actually getting the physical copy was brilliant, but it's it's sort of given me the encouragement to continue to write. And I think, again, it's another brilliant coping mechanism for anybody. If you're not right, you don't have to write a book necessarily, but journaling and just organising your thoughts on paper, I think there's a lot to say for that.
Yeah, definitely. So apart from writing your book and publishing it, what was one of the proudest moments across all of your careers?
For me personally, it's probably from where I was when I was at my lowest, and it sort of nearly came to the point of me taking my life. I think pulling myself out of that, of where I was to where I am now, because when you're in it, you just can't see a way out. I just couldn't see a way out, and I thought, I never thought I'd be here now. So it's probably that. Yeah, it's probably that. And like I said, I wouldn't. The strange thing is, I wouldn't change any of it. Wouldn't change any of it because sort of, I know it's cliche, but it makes you the person that you are. But it also puts me in a better position to help others that are in that position. So we'll all know of people that have taken their own life. I mean, the rate of veterans that are doing it are just it's just extraordinary. So if the book or a platform like this, if it helps one person sort of reach out and get help, then to me it's all been worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think by everyone sharing the stories and people realizing that, as you say, in that moment you think you were alone, but hopefully by people realizing that you're not and others have had similar, it will hopefully help. Save if it's just one life, then it's worth everything that everyone does, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So what's next, sort of, for you professionally or personally? What's your next goal? Because I'm sure you've got one.
Yeah, well, I think you're probably the same, but I think unless I'm chasing a goal, then I just can't settle, which is a blessing and a curse
Yeah,
because it's never enough, and
no,
you always need to be chasing something. So I do a lot more keynote speaking now to audiences, which I really enjoy. Um, there will be another book in the pipeline, um, hopefully next year. Uh, yeah, and we have a veterans network within the fire service, so we do a lot of fundraising for different charities. It's good for veterans that are in the fire service as well because there's an opportunity there to speak with and meet with people that may have had similar experiences and just like a bit of a support network. Um, so yeah, I think that's it's enough to keep me on my toes for now. Anyway.
yeah, for a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about role models and superheroes and however you want to call it. Well, who do you think's the main person that made a difference within your life?
I'd have to say it was my sister without doubt. Yeah, like I said, what she sacrificed as a young teenager for me, and how tough it must have been for her because didn't have a great deal, and she came out of school at 14 and became a full-time mum, and then obviously to literally save my life 7 years ago or whenever it was. So yeah, and she's sort of the only sort of family I have at the moment. So yeah, it'd have to be my sister. Although she wouldn't accept that. She doesn't know it, but yeah, I couldn't think of anybody else.
No, knowing your story, I think you have to say that definitely.
Yeah.
So what haven't we talked about that maybe we should have talked about?
Um, I think I'm glad that we've platforms like this are shedding a light on veteran stories or emergency services. I think, like you said, that everybody should be sharing their stories more. I always felt that, like I said, the narrative has changed around mental health, but I don't think it should be viewed as a weakness, but as a strength. And that platforms like this and so many others are only a good thing or a positive thing because somebody will listen to it somewhere and they'll be able to the story will resonate with their own experiences in some way. So I think that's really important. Like I said, regarding the fire, if there's any veterans listening that are considering that as a career path, I'm more than happy for anyone to reach out to me, send me a DM or whatever, and I'll help them in whatever way that I can to be successful in that process.
Oh, brilliant! So where can they find you if they need to hook up with you?
So I'm trying to be better on social media. So busy, I do find it a sort of a balance of time, but I'm mostly on Instagram, which is Beyond the Drop Zone. I'm on same. There's a Facebook page. There's TikTok, and there's a website as well, beyondthedropzone.com. So there's everything on there from public speaking, merchandise, just reaching out. Yeah, I think that's everything.
Brilliant. So the podcast actually is called Beyond the Barracks. We try and make that as we said earlier. So what does Beyond the Barracks mean to you?
I think the unique thing with veterans is like we're all in the same boat, so to speak. When we leave, the transition from leaving the military to being a civilian, it's incredibly difficult. It can be incredibly difficult because I know for me certainly because I joined at the age of 16. I'd become an adult in the military and didn't really know what it meant to be a civilian. So just silly things like I didn't know how to pay a bill because the army took care of everything for me. So getting out was incredibly different. And what I found is that everybody goes on their own paths. For me, I did close protection course and then sort of went into that line of work. But even now, I'm reaching out to people that I served with, and we experienced so much together. But then I left, and we just sort of lost contact. And 20 years later or whatever, we're sort of reconnecting. So everybody's going through the same stuff. Everybody is just trying to get by, pay the bills or whatever. And I think it's important to sort of reconnect with some of those people, because the power of networking and reaching out to old friends is really important. So, like I say, there's only recently I'm back in touch with a lot of the guys that I serve with in the machine gun platoon, and wherever we can, we'll help each other out. Whether that's a bed for the night if someone's up visiting, or a day on the hills, because it's out there. Everybody's in the same position. So I think that's really important too.
Yeah, definitely. Totally agree. Connection is key, really, isn't it? And after you've left the military, as you say, we're all pretty similar. We all have that. Oh my God, I've got to grow up and pay a bill, but no longer can I ring up the med centre and get an appointment. It's alien. So yeah, definitely keeping connected is key.
Yeah, because I think, like, especially during COVID, that was incredibly tough for a lot of veterans, because you go from, depending how long you're in, you're institutionalized to an extent, and you go from speaking to people every day and sort of having the crack and always being around people to being in complete isolation, which we know is destructive. It's a killer, being in isolation. So if there are any veterans listening, I definitely encourage you to at least check in with people that you serve with and just see how they're doing, because it surprised me how many people I knew live quite close to me now, and I just wasn't aware. So I constantly make an effort, although we all live busy lives, to put time aside to sort of reconnect with old friends and just get out on the mountains for the day or go for a coffee. Like I say, that's really, really important for me.
Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, getting and reconnecting is definitely a big thing, and around a healthy source like climbing a mountain.
Yeah.
So we can all moan together as we should jump.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant!
Yeah.
Well, it's been amazing to chat to you. I know we could have probably we'll probably have to do a second one when your next book is out, but it's been an incredible journey, an incredible story, and hopefully people can reach out to you and find your book and learn more about the inspiration that is Andy Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Gene. It's been a pleasure, and thanks for having this platform and speaking to people like myself and listening to their stories, and getting it out there. It's unusual to see you sat in in a room and not out somewhere clocking up miles, thousands of miles like you used to.
I need to get out. Get walking. Well,
Yeah.
thanks a lot, and I'm sure we'll meet very soon. Take care.
Yeah. All right. Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.